Hi, this is Stephen, and this is Astro Indicator Update, episode 38. And today is Sunday, May 10th. Sunday, May 10th. So what are we going to look at today? Well, I was curious to see, I've been reading about reports of the potential of possibility of China going digital with their currency, the yuan, but also backing it with gold. And I don't think anybody has a definite, answer or conclusion that they're going to be doing this soon, but I wanted to look at the astrology and really see if the odds were, better than 50-50 that this was going to happen. In addition, something very interesting came out about a very famous trader, Tudor Jones, buying Bitcoin, and then we'll get into our market updates. Okay, here's an article by a journalist that I've been reading for many years that I respect, Pepe Escobar. He's written for Asian Times for many, many years. He writes for RT, so he knows quite a bit about China and Russia. And in this article that came out just within this last week, he is reporting that they are getting ready for a digital yuan. They're going to adopt the blockchain technology to their banking system and essentially make their digitize their monetary system. So what he says here, last month the People's Bank of China confirmed that a group of top banks started trials in electronic payment in 4 different Chinese regions using the new digital yuan. The man with the plan is PBOC Governor Yi Gang. He has confirmed that apart from the trials, the PBOC is also testing hypothetical scenarios for the 2022 Winter Olympics. I don't know why I read that. But then Pepe goes on to say, is this going to be backed by gold? What does this all mean? And we get down to here, and he says the meat of the matter is that a digital sovereign yuan may be backed by gold. That's not confirmed yet. Gold could serve as a direct backup to back up bonds or just to lay there as collateral. What's certain is that once Beijing announces a digital currency backed by gold, it will be like the US dollar being struck by lightning. Why? Because none of the currencies of the world today are backed by a precious metal or backed by anything. Once a country does that, that currency will be much more attractive as a store of value, as a means of trade, and so forth. And it will be superior, if they do it, it will be superior to the US dollar. But are they going to do it? That's sort of the question. They are definitely moving to a digital currency based on the blockchain technology, which is, I think, a very smart thing. I don't think it's smart to go completely digital. I like to have some cash as well. But this issue of whether or not they are going to back their currency by gold is a very important one because of its effects on the US dollar. Now, we know from other sources, before I get into the astrology, let me just review this. Other sources for years have been reporting that China has been accumulating gold at a far faster rate than the U.S. is, as as a store of value in their monetary system. And it's highly likely that they have twice as much gold as the U.S. has right now. So they have that, they have this history of at least appearing that they're going to be using this gold at a certain point, or that they value gold very highly as sort of a stabilizing factor in their economy. So let's look at the astrology here and see what we see. Again, as usual, I have the Chinese chart in the middle here. And again, this was the most recent founding of their existing country, October 1st, 1949. And I have the transits in the outer ring where the planets are stationed or positioned right now. And so I'm going to be looking at these transits, through the lens of, economics and what they mean for, China and how they're thinking about their economy at the moment. Kind of what their, kind of the psyche, what the status of their psyche is at the moment relative to their economy. And right off the bat, you see that they're being definitely challenged because they have Saturn crossing their ascendant. And so they are being challenged because the U.S. has been, in a way, in an economic war with China, particularly over the last 8 months with, our tariffs and restrictions and things like that. I mean, one way that the U.S. has been promoting their dominance worldwide for many, with many countries is through, economics, their economic sanctions, things of that nature. But we have been targeting, particularly with the pandemic situation, we have been blaming China. Now we're going to continue to target them economically. And China is feeling this pressure, you can tell, with Saturn going over the ascendant. This is a difficult time for them. They're feeling a definite slowdown, stagnation, etc. But when people, from an economic standpoint, when you go through a Saturn period, you draw away from higher risk investments and you move towards investments that are more traditional, that are considered safe haven investments, and that will bring more stability to the current situation. And so those are the kind of the positive ways of responding to a heightened Saturn period for a country, in particular when you're talking about their economy. So what would be safe havens? What would bring more stability? What would be deemed a traditional choice? All those things point to precious metals and gold as being helpful for them at this moment in time. So we have, let me draw some things in here. So we have this going on. We have, Saturn crossing the ascendant. In addition, we have this conjunction taking place as well. And both of these are occurring throughout this year. We have Jupiter and Pluto by transit, conjunct natal Jupiter in their chart. And again, this can mean many things in astrology. But when you're just looking at it from an economic standpoint, the position of the Jupiter in a country's chart is going to deal a lot with its banking system. Okay? And so I see this transit as being reflective that their leaders, their financial leaders, are confident of making sort of a banking power play right now to reposition themselves in the world that will strengthen their banking system, okay? And on a big scale. So when I combine these elements, that's what I see what's happening. So we're gonna combine all these things at a certain point, and I feel they do indeed point to an increased possibility of backing their currency, the yuan, with gold. But let's move on, because we have some other interesting things that contribute to this. They also have Uranus in conjunct the Sun. So let's point that out. So here we have Uranus transiting, and it is 150 degrees away from their Sun. 7 degrees Taurus, 7 degrees Libra. This transit is going to just emphasize their inclination to be much more innovative now, particularly in the area of high-tech advancements. And this is where I see their orientation moving towards like the blockchain. This is highly reflective of that. And and then on top of that, we have Neptune is trining. The transit of Neptune is trining Venus. So Venus, from an economic perspective, is dealing with their money, what they value. We're going to combine that with Neptune, and Neptune has a lot to do with long-lasting, historically sound investments that often come from the ground or is related to, let's say, the oil industry. But Neptune, I haven't found to be that much involved in as a astrological factor in many other markets that I look at, except for gold. It really does seem to indicate when something is going to happen in the gold market. So I see that this association between Neptune and gold holds up from my research. And here you have it combined with the astrological element dealing with money, dealing with their currency. So they have a number of things going on right now throughout the year, in summary here, that do indeed point that they could be, the potential is really there that they could make an announcement that they have enough gold, they've accumulated it particularly over the last 10 or 15 years, to at least partially back their new digitized yuan with gold. And so that wouldn't surprise me at all. So I was curious. I wanted to look into it. And to me, it seems like it's a real, probability, maybe just versus a possibility. So let's move on here. This was a very interesting event related to cryptocurrencies that took place this week. And if you're not aware of who Paul Tudor Jones is, he is, he's really sort of legendary. He'd be in the top, 10 investment traders, over the last 35 years. So he has a track record, he has history, and to have him come out and support Bitcoin is really pretty amazing. So on Thursday, Paul Tudor Jones revealed that he placed a substantial bet on Bitcoin, arguing that the pioneering cryptocurrency was also the vehicle best suited to outperform during the coming decade. And he argued it will closely resemble the 1970s due to the mix of high inflation. The next decade will closely resemble the 1970s and as a mix of high inflation and low growth, popularly known as stagflation. So his endorsement here is pretty major, and most of the leading business cable channels picked up on it and reported on it, and so it was pretty significant. We're going to talk about Bitcoin a little bit more when I get to that market, because it really took a hit today and yesterday. But I think too many fundamental things are lining up to support a bullish case for Bitcoin. So he says that we could have stagflation over a several year period. And stagflation is sort of a combination of deflation, or kind of a depressed state, along with certain items going up in price, inflation. And one measure, or one indicator that is often used for whether or not inflation is starting to rise in the system, is the circulation of currency in the economy. And this is a chart from the Federal Reserve, website, and it is pointing to the fact that that the currency in circulation is rising rapidly right now. Now, back in 2008 and 9, they were, and with all the stimulus that they did then, the creation of new money, they were able to prevent this by essentially the money that they were giving to the banks. They kept on reserve. That newly created money they kept, and in a way discouraged lending by the banks, because they gave the banks an interest rate for holding that newly created money. And by setting up the situation, they were able to make the banks appear much more stable, and so forth. But they sat on the money, essentially. And here we have a different situation suddenly taking place, where this money is moving into the economic system, and that will then, at probably in somewhat short order, start showing up as higher prices, particularly with items that we need or that are going into short supply, possibly food. So I was curious. I checked out this just the other day, and indeed you see this sharp spike in the circulation of currency. So I think that's all I want to get into. So let's look at some markets. The Dow Jones Industrials is completely disconnected from reality. And so we have to look at, the technical indicators if you happen to be trading it, and the astrology. If you're new to this channel, I combine the technical analysis with astrological dates, and and sometimes I lean on one method of analysis more than another. Basically the horizontal lines are support and resistance lines. I use the momentum indicators down here. The vertical lines relate to astrological dates that I feel are important, which could indicate a change of direction or an inflection point. We are trading sideways in this market, basically. We've risen around 60% of the previous downturn. And normally when you get to hit that point, a market often stalls out. But it's really hard to say what's going on. I think there are some indications that this market may push higher over the next month or so, even though we are entering a time period where usually the Dow Jones drops off in the summertime. But we've crossed through the 50-day moving average here. We are just bumped above a trend line. So this was Friday's close, that green candle that you see right there. We're now above this trend line. However, we may be forming what's called possibly a head and shoulders pattern, because we have something that looks like this, okay? And this green line right here would be called the neckline of this particular pattern, and so this is a very important support level for this pattern that may be forming. If we break below this green line, then we could be heading south. The important dates coming up in particular are the 17th and 18th of May, because that is historically a pretty bullish date. And so we may trend down, we may pop higher after this date around May 18th. And then we have a sort of a long stretch of not much astrology supporting this chart. So when we get into June and July is when I think we have the potential to go down. However, this date is pretty bullish. Let's see where we're at when we get there through the week. Watch this neckline, this bright green line right there. If we break below it, we could be heading down. Okay, gold has been trading sideways as well. There hasn't been much astrology. Some things have been going on in the silver chart that have been supporting gold as well. So we have a long stretch of very little astrological activity. So it doesn't surprise me that we are kind of trading in a sideways pattern. We've broken out briefly above this triangle that was forming. On Friday we broke down from it, which is not the best sign in the world. However, this week, let's see. Yeah, this week we don't have much. However, the following week, starting on the 18th, I don't have a calendar right in front of me, but starting on the 18th, then the astrology starts to pick up. So this is the key level. This trend line right there is the key level for gold if you're watching the technicals, and this support line right here. If we break below there, we have a sizable gap down to the 50-day moving average. So we have to get out to like May 20th, even the 18th could support this market. So we're going kind of through a dry spell of energy, of astrological energy that is supporting the gold market. So it's not overbought though. It's not over. We're sort of in a neutral zone. But the fundamentals are so good with gold that I think if we get a big pullback, if you have, if you're an investor, you might look at precious metals here. Excuse me. Okay, here's silver. Silver had a bounce on a definite astrologically, potent day back on May 5th, I think, and I think it was also reflected in gold. Coming up, again, we don't really have too much happening this week, more so the following week. And so let's see how this plays out. What's likely to happen is silver is going to trade sideways until we get to this area. But sometimes, again, the fundamentals are very strong in this area, and they may override everything else, and we may continue to go higher. So in periods like this, you just need to, understand the technical elements in play, and and respect them essentially. Okay, Bitcoin had a tough day yesterday on Saturday. I mean, it was down, over 1,500 points. It was amazing. However, when you look at the channel that's been created in Bitcoin, it is still within that channel, and it's trying to trade up. We're developing a fairly long shadow or wick on the bottom of this candle, which is a good bullish sign. If we get up above this support area right here, and it might be at a support area right now, that is also a positive. Recently, these kind of orange trend lines are long-term trend lines, very important ones. And we blew through, and I think this was, we talked about Paul Tudor Jones, the very well-known trader supporting, investing in Bitcoin. I think this big green candle was a day that Bitcoin was responding to that news. And we went above of this very important trend line. It didn't hold. We blew back down, but we have not gone through this channel supportive line here. So what's happening astrologically in Bitcoin? Well, in a nutshell, we have a lot of volatility in this market over the next month. And it's this week, though, that the halving, which I talked about last week in my last video, is taking place. But we had the sell-off kind of occurring today and this weekend. So, my goodness, if you are interested and if you've done your homework and you're attracted to Bitcoin, this pullback could be a point of entry. Not investment advice, but just that's how traders often are thinking. If you look at all aspects of this trade or Bitcoin as an investment, fundamentally, technically, astrologically. Sort of like gold, Bitcoin and gold, they have stronger months coming up. A lot can happen between now and then, but they have stronger months coming up, and particularly end of June and July. So this market may move up and down for a while. Ethereum, like silver and gold, interact and influence each other. It's evident that Ethereum on some days is affecting the price of Bitcoin. And so it's traded down this weekend. It traded down and held, at least at the moment, is holding this channel line. It, though, doesn't have any astrology for, a week or so. Let me see if I can come up with a date on that. Yeah, not until next weekend, the 17th. So, play the technicals again. It should be a fairly bullish energy on this May 17th date. So, but Ethereum has been responding to its astrology, fairly well, pointing out, points of significant movement. And so, again, I think with the halving of Bitcoin, that's fundamentally very supportive. Eventually, we're going to get people, just wanting take a quick profit, and we'll get some volatility. But over time, that's very supportive for Bitcoin, and I think it will also affect prices in Ethereum as well. A few weeks ago, I talked about GDX, which is the junior gold mining ETF. It's getting a little rich. It's kind of coming up to points where sometimes you see a pullback. You saw at least a small pullback back here, not much of one actually. A larger one when we had the big downturn, related to pandemics and things. But we have come back strongly. We're fighting to get back into that channel. We're also getting a little top heavy in the MACD, where if we get a crossover here, we could get a pullback. So that's why I pointed this out. If gold, which to me looks like it's moving higher over the next year, that's going to, be evident in the price of the mining stocks, and this has a lot of headroom. So, this could be a time to take some profits, but then looking for some of these support areas to get back in. So anyway, that's, I think, it for today. We just have so many things going on in our world and our economy. I think some of these safe haven plays are not only going to be popular in China, they're going to be more and more popular in the U.S. So looking at these charts, if you're a potential investor, understanding how to use technical analysis, taking advantage of the astrology, I think could be useful for you in the future here. So again, my name is Stephen. I have a master's degree in psychology, researching financial astrology for 25 years. If you'd like to reach me, that's my email. I do accept Bitcoin donations. And if you like this video, please hit the like button. Consider subscribing. I do this usually once a week. So subscribing will help you get notified when that happens. But thank you for listening. Have a good week.